The debris field was still warm. Sensor Chief Verksala noted this first. Not the scale of it, not the tactical implication, but the heat signature bleeding off the wreckage like something recently alive. Metal cooling in vacuum did not behave this way. The chunks were too large, too uniform in temperature distribution, too recent asterisk. His instruments showed the human vessel had been destroyed 17 minutes ago. 17 minutes. The readings made no thermal sense. He flagged it, filed it under anomalous, moved on. That was his first mistake. The Dominion of Unbroken Sky had fired on the human battleship at a range of 40,000 kilometers, well within its primary battery's optimum envelope, well outside anything the humans could have effectively returned. Fleet Commander Orcs had not considered this a battle. She had considered it a demonstration, a message transmitted in the only language that civilizations sometimes needed to hear before they understood their position in the galaxy's hierarchy of consequence. The human ship had not maneuvered, had not broadcast a surrender, had not even powered up its secondary defensive arrays. It had simply held position, taken the shot and come apart. Confirmed kill, her tactical officer reported. No escape signatures, no debris-embedded life signs, complete structural dissolution. Orcs had nodded. Of course. Humans were biological soft, warm, prone to the same catastrophic fragility that afflicted most carbon-based species when exposed to directed gravitational shear at that yield. The engagement had taken 11 seconds. She had spent longer choosing her morning meal. Open a channel to the human homeworld, she said. Standard conquest protocol. Give them 48 hours to. Commander. She looked up. Verksala stood at his station with a particular stillness that meant something had broken his assumptions hard enough that he hadn't yet decided what to replace them with. The thermal readings on the debris field, he said. I've run a second analysis. And he turned. His expression was one she had never seen on him before, and she had served with Verksala for 9 years. The heat isn't residual, it's generative. The bridge went quiet in a way that felt different from normal quiet. Explain that, Orcs said carefully. The wreckage is producing heat, not releasing it, not dissipating a stored thermal event. He paused. Something in that debris field is still running. What the fleet did not know, what no one outside a very small room on a very unremarkable administrative station had known until 43 minutes ago, was that the *Resolute Meridian* had not been a battleship. It had never been a battleship. It had been a battery. The distinction mattered enormously, and it would take the Dominion of Unbroken Sky approximately 6 more hours to begin understanding why, and another 4 days to understand what that difference truly meant. By then, the question of understanding would have become somewhat academic. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The human woman who had designed the Resolute Meridian's core systems was named Lieutenant Commander Priya Anand, and she was sitting in a folding chair in a hallway that smelled like recycled air and old coffee, watching a small screen mounted on a rolling cart, waiting for a number to appear. She had been awake for 31 hours. Around her, maybe a dozen other people in various states of exhaustion sat or stood or leaned against walls, all watching their own screens, all waiting for the same thing. Nobody talked. Talking had stopped about 4 hours ago when the weight of what they'd done, what they'd allowed to happen, had settled too heavily for small sounds to navigate around. The screen flickered. A number appeared. Priya exhaled very slowly through her nose. She looked at the number for a long moment. Then she picked up a comm unit, pressed it to the side of her head, and said 6 words. All stations, the window is open. 47 light minutes away, distributed across a volume of space that the Dominion's long-range sensors had mapped, cataloged, and categorized as empty, empty being the relevant word, the important word, The word that was about to stop being accurate. 10,000 vessels received that signal. 10,000 vessels that had been running cold, running dark, running silent, running on minimal power signatures specifically calibrated to read as the natural electromagnetic background radiation of the sector, a calibration that had taken humans 3 years to develop and had required the sacrifice of the Resolute Meridian's crew of 212 people to execute, because the Resolute Meridian had been broadcasting those calibrations live as she held position and waited to be destroyed. The debris field's anomalous heat signature finally made sense. The Meridian hadn't just taken the shot. In her final moments, she'd completed a transmission. The fleet lit up. "Commander," said the tactical officer, and this time his voice had a texture to it that Orudashit had never heard from him before. She was already looking at the scope when he said it. "I see them," she said. "Initial count is," he stopped, ran the scan again. "Initial count is incoherent. The system is refusing to complete the count." "Why?" He turned to look at her. He was a Keth, four-eyed, red-plated, 11 years in fleet service. He looked in this moment like a junior cadet who had walked into the wrong room. "Because it was designed," he said slowly, "to stop counting at 10,000 contacts and flag the reading as a sensor malfunction." The silence on the bridge was absolute. "Because," he continued, 10,000 simultaneous contacts was classified as an impossible number, a system error, not a tactical reality." Orudashit stared at the scope. 10,000 points of light, resolving from nothing, from empty space. "How long," she said, "have they been there?" Nobody answered, because nobody wanted to say the number. Verksalan said it anyway. "Based on the thermal cold start data," he paused. "Commander, they've been there for at least 3 months. 3 months. The Dominion had issued its ultimatum to humanity 9 weeks ago. The negotiation period, which the Dominion had not genuinely intended to be a negotiation, had lasted 7 weeks. The Resolute Meridian had taken position 6 weeks ago, publicly, loudly, broadcasting on all frequencies that humanity was stationing its last remaining capital ship as a show of defiance at the outer marker of its home system. Its last remaining capital ship. That phrase had been transmitted 11,000 times across Dominion comm networks in 7 languages. The Dominion Strategic Intelligence Division had verified it, had confirmed human shipyard activity was negligible, had confirmed human military expenditure was catastrophically reduced, had run 17 independent analyses and reached the same conclusion 17 times. Humanity had 1 ship left, and now that ship was debris. Everything the Dominion had concluded from that premise, every tactical decision, every diplomatic calculation, every assumption about how the next 48 hours would unfold, had been built on a foundation that Priya Anand and a small group of very tired people had spent 3 years quietly, patiently, carefully removing. Humanity had never stopped building ships. They had stopped building them where anyone was watching. Sensor Chief Verksalan's second anomalous reading came 20 minutes later, and it was worse. He had been trying to establish the configuration of the human fleet, class designations, weapon signatures, drive types, and running into something that his instruments kept trying to interpret as interference. The contacts were real. The count was real. He was certain of this. What his instruments could not parse was why each contact was reading differently. Not just marginally differently, fundamentally, as though the 10,000 vessels had been designed by 10,000 different engineers using 10,000 different philosophies, and nobody had ever required them to agree. "They're not a fleet," he said aloud, not quite meaning to. Orudashit looked at him. "I mean, they are a fleet. They're clearly coordinated. The signal discipline alone proves that. But they're not a uniform fleet. These vessels are not the same class. They're not the same configuration. Some of them aren't even the same generation of technology. He pulled up 3 side-by-side analysis windows. This contact is reading as a converted cargo hauler. This one is reading as a frontier mining platform with weapons mounted externally. This one I cannot classify at all. What's your tactical interpretation? Orudashit asked. Verksalan looked at his commander. Then he looked at the 10,000 lights on his scope. I don't have one, he said. Every model I run assumes a logical opponent. It took Priya 3 cups of terrible coffee and 40 minutes of watching status reports scroll past before she let herself think about Commander Ewan. Marcus Ewan had commanded the Resolute Meridian *, had volunteered for it, had been one of the first people to understand what the Meridian * actually was, what it actually needed to do, and had sat across a table from Priya in a small conference room on an unremarkable station and said, with the particular quietness of someone who has already finished an argument with themselves, you need someone who will hold position, completely, without any ambiguity that the Dominion sensors could misread as an attempt to maneuver. Marcus, she had started. I know what you're about to say. Do you? He had looked at her steadily. You're going to tell me there might be another way, and I'm going to tell you that there isn't, and you already know that, and the reason you're hesitating is because you like me and you're hopping. I'll let you off the hook. A pause. I'm not going to let you off the hook, Priya. This is too important. She had not let herself think about that conversation for 6 weeks. She had needed the compartmentalization. The work required it. Now the window was open and the fleet was lit, and Commander Marcus Ewan was 212 pieces of cooling metal at 40,000 kilometers from a Dominion battle cruiser. And she thought about him, and she let the weight of it settle exactly once before she locked it back down. There was still too much to do. Fleet Commander Orudashit made a decision. It was a rational decision, constructed on rational premises, executed with rational precision. She could not have known it was wrong. The logic was sound. The intelligence was verified. The tactical framework was appropriate for every situation she had ever trained for. She ordered a general advance. The Dominion fleet, 43 vessels, each outmassing anything in the human formation by a factor of 8 to 15, began to move forward. The strategic calculation was straightforward. 10,000 ships sounded like a large number, but 10,000 small ships, 10,000 converted haulers and mining platforms and jury-rigged frontier vessels was not the same as a war fleet. Biomass against armor, numbers against yield. She had also noted something her tactical officer had flagged. The human fleet was not in a formation. Not in any formation she recognized. Not in any geometric arrangement that corresponded to a known tactical doctrine. They were spread across an enormous volume with irregular spacing and what appeared to be random orientation. The Dominion's tactical doctrine AI had analyzed the arrangement for 7 minutes before generating output. The output said, chaotic distribution, no tactical coherence, recommend engagement. Orudashit agreed with her AI. She had also never considered the possibility that her AI had only ever been trained on tactical arrangements that made sense. Priya was on her 4th cup of coffee when the Dominion fleet started moving, and she felt the particular hollow calm of a plan entering its most dangerous phase. Her calm crackled. Commander Anand, they're advancing. I see it. The distribution model is holding. They're reading us as disorganized. Good, she paused. How long until they cross the inner marker? 90 minutes at current velocity. All right, she set down the coffee cup. Start the first rotation. Stagger the cold drops the way we practiced. I want the Dominion sensors to track the ones we want them to track. A beat of silence on the comm. Commander, just to confirm we're going with the full protocol. Even the decoys, she said. Yes. Another pause, longer. Understood. She clicked off the comm and stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at nothing. Somewhere in that fleet of 10,000 vessels, 1,400 of them were not ships. They were shells. Unpiloted frames with functioning drive signatures and weapon ports that would never fire because there was nothing behind them to fire them. They had been built to die convincingly. They had been built to be destroyed in a way that would look, to Dominion sensors, like losses. The plan required the Dominion to believe it was winning. The plan required the Dominion to destroy things that looked like ships. The plan also required the Dominion to advance far enough to cross a very specific threshold. What happened at that threshold was the part Priya had not briefed her full staff on, not because she didn't trust them, because some information, once known, changes the way people move, changes something visible in the eyes and the posture and the hesitation before a keystroke. She needed everyone to look like people who were fighting a desperate battle against a superior enemy. Because they were. Just not quite in the way the Dominion thought. Here is what Verksala noticed 20 minutes into the advance. The human fleet was losing ships. Not catastrophically, the Dominion's forward elements were engaging the outer clusters of the human formation, and the returns showed kills. Confirmed kills. The humans were dying. They were also not retreating. Assess behavioral pattern, Orudashit said. Unknown, Verksalan said. They're not running, they're not regrouping. He watched the scope for a moment. They're trading, 1-for-1. A human vessel closes to short range, draws fire, is destroyed. Another vessel takes its position. Same approach vector, same result. They're sacrificing themselves for proximity. They appear to be, but the ships closing to short range aren't their heaviest assets. They're the smaller ones, the converted vessels. He shook his head slowly. They're using their weakest units to advance against our strongest. To what end? Verksalan did not answer immediately. He was looking at a second screen, a tracking analysis he'd run almost unconsciously, the way long-experienced sensor operators developed automatic pattern checks that ran alongside their primary attention. The destroyed human vessels were leaving debris fields. All debris fields left signatures. These ones were leaving signatures that looked, very slightly, like the thermal pattern he'd noted in the asterisk Resolute Meridian's asterisk wreckage. Generative, he had called it, not dissipating a stored thermal event, producing. He pulled up the analysis on 3 of the new debris fields, ran the comparison. Commander, he said, I need you to look at this. She came to his station. He showed her the screens. The destroyed vessels, she said slowly, they're not just dying. No. They're doing what the first ship did. Yes. What are they transmitting? Verksalan checked, ran 3 decryption passes, got nothing intelligible, which was itself informative. Human encryption at this level suggested coordination infrastructure far beyond what their assessed capability allowed for. I can't read the content, he said, but the transmission pattern, he hesitated. He was not a man who hesitated. It matches a command architecture, a distributed one. Each destroyed vessel is relaying something to the vessels behind it. Orudashit stared at the screen. They're using their own casualties, she said, as a communications relay. Yes. The bridge was silent. They designed their ships, she said, to be destroyed in a specific sequence, so that each destruction would forward a signal to the next layer. She looked at Verksalan. How many layers? He ran the projection. Based on the pattern, he stopped. Started again. Commander, if this analysis is correct, they have enough ships queued in this architecture to sustain coordinated communication across the entire engagement volume for approximately 6 more hours. 6 hours of combat, coordinated through a relay system that only functioned when ships died. They planned this, Orudashit said. Yes. They planned to lose ships, planned for it, built it into the architecture. Yes. She straightened. What are they coordinating toward? Verksalen's third screen lit up. I think, he said quietly, we just crossed the inner marker. Priya heard the confirmation through her comm in 3 words from a voice she recognized as belonging to a 23-year-old navigation specialist, named Kofi Mensah, who had been awake even longer than she had. They're inside. She pressed a button. Not a metaphorical button, a physical one. A green-lit pressure switch on a small panel that had been installed in this hallway specifically so that she would not have to be anywhere dramatic to do this. So that it would feel like a small thing. It was not a small thing. Inside the volume the Dominion fleet had just entered. Inside the irregular, chaotic, tactically incoherent distribution of 10,000 human ships were 9 positions. Just 9. Spaced at geometrically precise intervals that would have been invisible in any scan focused on the ships themselves. Each position contained a gravity anchor. Devices that humanity had been developing for 11 years in deep black programs. Devices that generated a contained gravitational shear field strong enough to prevent faster-than-light translation within a defined volume. The Dominion fleet could no longer jump out. They were not trapped in the sense of being surrounded. They could still move, still fight, still operate at sublight speeds. The human fleet was not capable of destroying 43 Dominion warships directly, not at any cost Priya was authorized to pay. But they didn't need to destroy them. They needed to hold them. For 11 hours, 43 minutes. Because 11 hours, 43 minutes from now, the Galactic Compact's emergency arbitration fleet would arrive at these coordinates, summoned 6 weeks ago, in secret, by the same signal relay architecture that the human fleet was currently dying to maintain. Priya had never intended to win this battle militarily. She had intended to make it impossible for the Dominion to win it quickly. Those were not the same thing. And the Dominion, she was quite certain, had not planned for the difference. We can't translate, said the navigation officer. Her voice was controlled in the way that voices became controlled when control was the only option left. Confirmed, Orudashit asked. Every jump prep aborts, gravitational shear across the entire volume. The interference pattern is a pause. It's artificial, deliberate. They've anchored the space. Orudashit absorbed this. She looked at the scope. She looked at the 10,000 human vessels, still burning, still dying, still trading their own ships for incremental advance, still maintaining a combat posture that made no tactical sense because it wasn't optimized for destroying the Dominion fleet. It was optimized for something else. She thought about the 9 weeks of negotiation, the 7 weeks of diplomatic theater, the way humanity had been transparent about its weakness, vocal about its suffering, specific about its limitations. They showed us their last ship, she said slowly. It wasn't a question. It was the sensation of understanding arriving from the wrong direction. They wanted us to see it, wanted us to know they had one left, wanted us to decide we could. She stopped. How long, she asked, very quietly, until we can force a path through the gravitational anchors? Navigation officer, the anchors appear to be hardened. Destroying them would require a longer pause. Approximately 14 hours of sustained primary battery fire to locate and destroy all 9, based on current shear mapping. And how long until the human ships, at current attrition rate, exhaust their ability to maintain the engagement? Tactical officer, at projected rates, he checked, rechecked. 18 hours. They have enough ships to sustain this formation and this relay architecture for 18 hours. The gravity of it arrived slowly, as truths that reorganize everything tend to. Humanity had spent 3 years building 10,000 ships. They had built them in secret. They had built them to lose. They had built their communications infrastructure into the act of losing, so that every death strengthened the network. They had set a trap that required the Dominion to do exactly what the Dominion would most want to do: advance, engage, destroy. And they had called for help 6 weeks ago. Who did they call? Orudashit asked. Verksalan pulled up the long-range scan. His hands, she noticed, were very still. Commander, he said, I'm reading 17 signatures inbound. Compact arbitration classification. They'll reach this volume in, he checked the time, 11 hours, 31 minutes. Orudashit stood in the center of her bridge and felt something she had not felt since she was a junior officer on her first contested deployment. She felt genuinely uncertain. They didn't fight us, she said. No, said Verksalan. They let us come here, let us destroy the decoy, let us advance, let us believe we were winning, let us cross the marker, each sentence landing like something dropped from a height. They needed us inside this volume, committed to this engagement with compact observers inbound for long enough that. She stopped herself. For long enough that we cannot act without the compact witnessing it, Verksalan finished. The human fleet was still burning. Ships still dying one by one, trading themselves for signal relay seconds, for position, for the sheer physical fact of remaining in the field. They weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to still be there when the witnesses arrived. Open a channel to that human station, Orudashit said. Her voice had changed. Priya was not expecting her comm to buzz, with an incoming request from the Dominion of Unbroken Sky Asterisk. She stared at it for 2 seconds. Then she accepted. The voice that came through was not what she'd expected, not hard, not imperious. It was measured, careful, the voice of someone recalibrating. This is Fleet Commander Orudashit. I wish to speak with whoever planned this. Priya looked at the wall for a moment. This is Lieutenant Commander Priya Anand, Republic Defense Engineering Corps. A pause. You're an engineer. Yes. Not a fleet commander, not a strategic officer. No. Another pause. Longer. You built a communications network out of ship destruction sequences. Yes. You spent 3 years hiding 10,000 vessels in a sector we'd mapped as empty. We spent 2 years calibrating the emission profiles, 1 year on the vessels themselves. Your last capital ship was a transmission platform. It was always a transmission platform. We started calling it a battleship 8 months ago, publicly, to give you something to destroy. The pause this time was the longest yet. 212 people, the fleet commander said, on that ship. Priya's jaw tightened. Yes. They knew. Every one of them. Why? It wasn't entirely a question. It was something more like a collision between a logical framework and a fact that wouldn't fit inside it. Priya thought about how to answer that. Thought about Marcus Ewan in a small conference room saying this is too important asterisk. Thought about the 211 other people who had said versions of the same thing. Because, she said, the alternative was the Dominion reaching our homeworld, and none of them were willing to let that happen. That is not, Orudashit stopped. That is not a strategically optimized calculus. No, Priya agreed, it isn't. Silence on the channel. You cannot destroy 43 warships with what you have, Orudashit said. Even holding us here, you know this. Yes. So this ends with compact arbitration, with us contained, witnessed, unable to act without galactic consequence. You've turned a military engagement into a legal event. That was the plan. You lost ships for this, real ships, you're still losing them. Yes. Why not simply, a pause, why not simply present the evidence to the compact first? Why stage a battle at all? And here Priya paused, because this was the question she'd expected, the one that had a real answer, and the answer was not comfortable. "'Cause," she said, "if we'd gone to the compact first, the Dominion's legal team would have had time to reframe the narrative, to characterize the engagement as a defensive posture, to make this about interpretation." She paused. "We needed you here, committed, on record as having fired on and destroyed what you were told was our last military vessel. We needed the compact to arrive to find a Dominion fleet in human space, inside a combat engagement with kill confirmations already on record." Another silence. "You sacrificed your own ships," Orudashit said slowly, "to remove our ability to reframe what we were doing. Every ship we lose is evidence of Dominion aggression, witnessed in real time by compact sensors. And the gravity anchors mean you can't leave before the witnesses arrive." The channel was quiet for almost 10 seconds. "Lieutenant Commander Anand," Fleet Commander Orudashit said at last. Her voice had something in it that Priya couldn't immediately name. "I have commanded fleets for 22 years. I have fought 17 engagements across 8 star systems. I have studied every recorded military action in compact history going back 400 years. A pause. I have never encountered a strategy that required this." "Required what?" "Required this much willingness to be hurt." Priya didn't answer immediately. "It wasn't willingness," she said finally. "It was necessity. There's a difference." "Is there?" She thought about that. Thought about Marcus. Thought about the ships that were still burning out there, still dying in sequence, still maintaining the relay with each transmission passed from wreckage to wreckage like a torch handed down a line of people standing in the dark. "No," she admitted, "probably not." The compact arbitration fleet arrived at 11 hours, 29 minutes. 14 minutes early, which meant either the signal had traveled faster than projected or someone had been paying closer attention to the situation than the official record would later suggest. The engagement froze. Not by order of Orudashit, not by agreement from the human fleet, by the automatic communication lock protocols that activated the moment compact arbitration signatures were detected by both sides' systems simultaneously. An old law, a structural law, built into the comm architecture of every spacefaring civilization in the compact for exactly this kind of moment. The battle stopped mid-breath, and the record stood as it was. Dominion fleet inside human territorial space. Confirmed kill of a human vessel designated as a military capital ship. Ongoing combat engagement. Human losses, 843 vessels destroyed, all with confirmed crew, not decoys. The decoys had all been preserved in the outer layers, used only as bait in the early engagement phases. 843 ships with real people on them, who had held position and maintained the relay and done exactly what Marcus Ewan had done, at smaller scale, multiplied 843 times over. Later, a compact arbitration officer would ask Priya how she had gotten that many people to agree to that plan. She would think about it for a long moment. "I didn't convince them," she'd say. "I explained what was at stake and asked. Every single one of them said yes." The arbitration officer, a species called the Ven, who communicated through chromatic skin patterns and had no word in their language for asterisk irrational courage, because the concept had never needed a word before, would change color in a way their translator could not adequately render. The closest approximation the system would offer was confused reverence. The Dominion's legal team was very good. They offered 7 different frameworks for reinterpreting the engagement. They cited precedent. They cited defensive necessity. They cited the history of the contested outer markers. The compact arbitration panel listened to all 7 frameworks carefully. Then they played the sensor record of the asterisk resolute meridian asterisk holding position and taking a direct hit without maneuvering. Then they played the sensor record of 843 human ships doing approximately the same thing in sequence. Then they played the communication log of Fleet Commander Orudashit's conversation with Lieutenant Commander Priya Anand. The Dominion's legal team did not have an eighth framework. The ruling took 4 days. It was not the most sweeping ruling in compact history. It did not end the Dominion's standing in the galactic community, did not strip them of military capacity, did not impose punitive measures of existential weight. What it did was simpler and, in many ways, more permanent. It established, as a matter of formal compact record, that humanity had been targeted for conquest by an entity with greater military power, had sustained the engagement without surrendering, had maintained the legal and evidential architecture of their defense across 11 hours and 43 minutes of active combat, and had done so through means that could only be classified, under compact law, as protected civilian and military self-determination, which meant that any future Dominion action against humanity would not be classified as a military engagement. It would be classified as a war crime. The Dominion did not attempt to contest the ruling. Priya was in the same hallway when the ruling came through. Different chair. She'd replaced the folding one with a slightly better folding one, which represented the only significant improvement in her circumstances over the preceding 4 days. She still smelled like recycled air and old coffee. The comm buzzed, Kofi Mintz's voice. "It's done, Commander." She nodded at the wall. "Casualty figures finalized?" she asked. A pause. 843 ships, full crew complement on each. His voice was steady in the way that voices became steady when steadiness was the only viable option. 4,211 people. She nodded again. "And the Meridian asterisk," she said. "Including the asterisk, Meridian asterisk. 4,423 people in total, against a homeworld of 9 billion that the Dominion would not now reach, against a future that would not now include Dominion flags on human stations, Dominion administrators in human cities, Dominion law replacing human law on the planet where Priya Anand had been born and Marcus Ewan had grown up, and 4,000 other people had grown up and learned their names and found the things they loved. It was enough, she said. Not triumphantly, not as a celebration. As a statement of the only arithmetic that mattered. "Yes," said Kofi, "it was enough." She sat in the hallway for another hour after that, not doing anything in particular, just being a person for a while before the next phase started, and she would need to be something more purposeful again. Somewhere in the debris field, scattered across 40,000 kilometers, were the pieces of a ship that had never been a battleship. They were still warm. In the official compact historical record, the engagement would be indexed under the category asymmetric legal military action, unanticipated doctrine asterisk. Fleet Commander Orudashit would file a separate personal report that was never intended for circulation, but was eventually archived in the Dominion's military intelligence library and read, over the following decades, by every officer candidate in their command track. It contained one line that candidates were required to discuss in their third-year strategic theory seminar. They did not fight us to win. They fought us to remain present, to remain on record, to remain in the field long enough that the question of winning became irrelevant. And they did this knowing the cost, having calculated the cost, and paying the cost in full without hesitation, without capitulation, and without the expression that a rational species wears when it accepts an unacceptable loss. I do not know what expression that is. I only know I have not seen it on a human face. I do not think it exists. The last ships of the human fleet were still in formation when the arbitration panel's ruling arrived, battered, depleted, running on minimum power, but present. Still present. Holding the field they'd been given, holding the line they'd agreed to hold, burning through the last of their reactor reserves to stay exactly where they were. When the compact's communication lock released and the human fleet network reconnected on open channels. The first broadcast was not a victory declaration, not a tactical update, not a command order. It was a list of names. All 4,423 of them. Read aloud, in full, across every frequency the fleet's communications array could reach. The broadcast lasted 3 hours and 40 minutes. And every ship in that field, human, Dominion, compact, sat in silence and received it. Because some things are not announced, some things are simply witnessed. The galaxy, it turned out, did not need to understand why humans were willing to die in sequence, passing signals through their own wreckage, spending lives like relay stations to sustain a plan built on the premise that they would lose and lose and lose until they didn't have to lose anymore. The galaxy only needed to understand that they would. That they could. That no projection, no calculation, no strategic model had predicted it, because no rational model built by a species that valued survival would have produced that output. Humanity was not the strongest species in the galaxy. They were the species that had looked at the cost, counted it exactly, and paid it anyway, and then sat down in a folding chair in a hallway smelling of recycled air to wait for the world to catch up to what they'd done. And somewhere in the debris, still cooling now, finally, 4,423 people who had known the plan and said yes to it anyway began their long, slow drift into history. Not as casualties, as architecture,